Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It's Heidi. Today I'm gonna show you how I use watercolor and gouache in my coloring book pages. This was a request from one of my subscribers named Anne, and I thought today would be a good opportunity to do that. So I have a page from the Lost Ocean Artist Edition by Johanna Basford, and on the back of each page there's this little image, just like a little sampler image that's on every page, and I thought that would be a good little tester to try this on. So that's the page we're working on, and it's on a heavy cardstock. So watercolor and gouache work really well with that. And then I have Reeves brand watercolors and gouache. And this is the watercolors, this is gouache. I have my little palette, my glass tile with some colors. I just picked some at random. This is the gouache over here, and this is the watercolor, and I'm just gonna sort of do both in one image. And just show you how I would kind of go about it. The brushes that I have are the Blick Master Synthetic Round Brush in number 0, which is a really small brush for tiny details. And then I have number 2 Raphael Carroll Synthetic, and this is also a round brush. So this is a little bit bigger. You can get away with using this with small areas because once it's wet it goes to a very fine point, so I'll use both of these. So I guess let's just get started. I am going to do first, let's see, I'll use the larger brush, and I have my water over here out of line in the camera, I think. And I'm just going to, and these are just, like I said, kind of random colors, just for demonstration's sake. So let's take some of this purple. This is violet, so I've got Payne's Gray, violet, crimson, and peach. These are the watercolors. So I'm just gonna add some water, make it nice and thin. I usually do start with like a very light wash and then build up the color. And on a coloring book, on a normal coloring book page in a book, this would probably behave a little differently because this paper that I'm using right here is so much thicker, and it takes a lot more to damage the paper, although it isn't technically a watercolor paper per se. But in a coloring book, you would need to let things dry before you go back with a second coat a lot of the time, because otherwise the paper is going to start to fall apart and it's going to buckle a lot. So I'm just kind of going over all these areas with a light wash of color. This is pretty much what I normally do. How I would go about it on a, let's say, another Johanna Basford image, or another image where it had these little areas like this. So let's see, and I think what I'm going to do is add a little bit of, just a little bit of gray to that, and I just add a little bit right into the purple that I was using before to kind of blend the two. And then I think we'll just go over, just going to dab it on in the areas that seem darkest, maybe the shadow areas. Create some shadows there. I might want to blend out that area a little bit. So I'm just going to wash out my brush, get a little bit more water in there, and just sort of add a little bit of water there and let it kind of blend out. I don't know if you can see that. I hope so. So I have a new setup with my camera here. I'm using I got a different tripod. I don't know if you call this a tripod. It's like a gooseneck clamp thingy. And this is the first time using this. And I can't see the screen. So I just have to kind of hope this is looking good. So yeah. Kind of see what I did there, sort of, I don't know, just mess with it a little bit until you get the look that you want. Maybe even add a little bit more water here. Okay. That looks pretty good. And so I've been using my larger brush for this, just in case you didn't see that. So I think, let's see, let's change brushes and go to the really super tiny brush. Well, it's not the smallest you can possibly get by any means, but it's the smallest. It's the smaller of the two that I have here. So I think what I'm going to do next is get a little of this crimson watercolor, and let's do that little crab. I have to kind of reach over this here. It's a little bit awkward. So I'm just using a very, very tiny bit of paint and water, very minimal water. But you can just keep going over this as many times as you need to get the darkness that you want. Oop, I missed that little leg. Okay. And then, let's see, what will we do next? I think what I want to show you is how I might do some gouache in a small area, and I'm just going to take a little bit of the red over here, and you can see this is much thicker. And I mean, gouache is more opaque than watercolor. You can use them exactly like watercolors. If you add water to it, it will thin out just like a watercolor, but when you use them a little bit thicker, they go on opaque, and it's kind of a nice effect. So I'm just going to go over, this is going to be a crazy colored shell. Just going to go over the edges here. And because this is opaque, I would probably not use it in areas that have texturing where I want that to show, like these little dots here or there, or this stuff here. I probably would use watercolor for that area because I want those little details to show. But on areas like this where it's just a solid white line, oops. I went out of the line a little bit. Oh well. So I hope you can see what that looks like. It's a little bit more opaque. And you want to get this, at least I find it to be easier to use if you just add a tiny bit of water to it. If you use it straight out of the tube, it's a little bit too thick. But if you add just a tiny bit of water, it goes on more easily. But again, this is one of those things, it's like a user preference. So you would have to just kind of play with it and figure out what you like, what works for you. Add a little bit more, just a drop of water. Okay, so let me show you how gouache can behave like watercolor. So I'm going to take some of this yellow and just add a whole bunch of water to it and just water that down, thin it out quite a bit. So now that's essentially watercolor, and it should behave more like regular watercolor. So, whoops, just gonna go over this shell right here. So you see how that's much less opaque. It's not opaque at all. So, you know, you could actually use a gouache set in place of watercolor. You could, I mean, you could have it for both. If you didn't have watercolor to begin with and you didn't want to buy both, you could just buy the gouache and you could probably get away with that. So I'm going to use this yellow, and you can combine the two. I don't know what I'm going to do here. Let's make these yellow. Okay. Then I think what I will do is, just for fun, let's take a little bit of the Payne's Gray watercolor, mix it in with that purple. And I just want to see, I've actually never done this before, like tried to mix gouache and watercolor in one thing. I'm just going to go back over this with a little bit of gray here for shadow and see how that works. Oops. Just a little bit more water to it. See if that will blend out. Yeah, so that works. I mean, I don't know about the colors here, but the technique seems to be working fine. Watercolor on top of gouache. Yeah, so that seemed to work. All right, what else? I mean, so that's the essential technique. There's really nothing to it. It's just very small amount of water, small brushes, starting with light washes and moving towards darks. That's how I do it anyway, light to dark. I don't know how others may do it. So I'm just using some of this peach watercolor here. And what else shall we do? Maybe let's see, let's add, just to show you how I might mix the colors, let's add a little bit of this orange gouache into the peach, just to lighten it up a little. Still a little bit thicker than I would normally go, so I'm going to add some more water. Okay. And I think this does actually make it a little bit more opaque than you would normally have with just a watercolor. Adding that gouache into it. And maybe here. Okay, and then what I'm going to try and do is just add a teensy bit of a reddish tone to the ends of that, whatever it was that we just painted, this little thing here. Just gonna try to blend that in so that there's more of a gradient. And you can see how it's I hope you can see that it's starting to blend in on its own. It kind of just mixes in with the original color. As long as it's wet, it'll do that. And let's see, what else should we do here? Let's take a little bit more gray and let's go over these here. I'm also farther away from the paper than I would normally be because of the camera. I'm trying not to hit the camera with my head. There's a little bit of white space. Okay. And then, just for fun, let's see, I'm going to take some more orange gouache and add just a teensy bit of water to lighten up the consistency. And then maybe, okay, this is going to be sort of an awkward thing, but I'm going to try and go over this. I think it's a little bit too thick, but you can see what I'm trying to do. So it makes a more opaque line there. Yeah, I think that worked. What else? Maybe I'll take just a little bit more of this crimson watercolor, make a really light wash, and then just add a little bit of that color to this edge here, just to show some more blending. Try to sort of blend that in right here. Yeah. And I want that crab to be a little bit more red, so I'm gonna water down this red gouache so it's just like a watercolor, and I'm just gonna go over the top of what we've got already. And I was going to demonstrate using my iridescent watercolors as well, but I decided not to add another element to this. But if I were going to do that, I would just probably take a color that's similar to the color I was working with and just blend in some of the iridescent right into it to add a little bit of sparkle. Because the colors that I have aren't the best. They're okay. They're a little bit limited, so I would probably just mix it in with what I was using and you would never know the difference. Alright, so that crab's looking a little bit better. And, that's pretty much it. I demonstrated watercolor, gouache, a little bit of shading, how you can kind of use them together, mix them up, and have fun in your coloring books using water mediums. So I hope that was useful. I hope it was entertaining at least, and thanks for watching. Thanks for coming back to my channel, and I hope everyone's well and happy and enjoying your stuff, whatever it is you're doing out there. So I'll see you in the next video. Bye.